Good morning. Isn't this new furnace nice in here? Nice and cool. Oh my goodness. Just take a nice cool breath in. Enjoy that. Let's sing together a morning song out of the Till hymn book, the very first song in the book, hymn number 1000, Morning Has Come. If you're joining us online, the lyrics will be posted in the chat. The lyrics will also be posted up here on the screen. I invite you to rise in body and our spirit, and let's sing together. Thank you for singing. Please be seated.
Good morning, and welcome to Olympia Unitarian Universalist congregation. Our community envisions an interconnected world that is loving, just, and healthy. We commit to live out our mission to welcome and wonder, embrace and empower, bridge and become. Thank you for joining us today, everyone. My name is Janet Spencer. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a member of the Worship Arts team. Leading worship with me today is the Reverend Carol McKinley, OUUC's affiliated community minister. Also Troy Fisher, our music director, and Reverend Sarah Lewis, the director of community and faith development. Here's a few things you should know about our service today. First of all, we are streaming live on Zoom and YouTube, and the service is being recorded. For those here in the sanctuary, we have, you can see the subtitles on the screen in front. I don't know if they say what we're really saying, but we try. We are a multi-generational community, and we value our young ones. As you see, we have fluffy chairs in front and toys for the children. And kids, babies, and teens are all welcome in the sanctuary. There is also nursery care and a story time program for children in the classroom wing. We are grateful for the many hands that helped make worship happen this morning. Thank you all who contribute in so many ways. Now, a personal note, very short. I'm turning 84 on Tuesday, and I'm retiring from my celebrant job. I just want to thank all of you for the support and encouragement that you've given me. After the service, everyone will have a chance to discuss reflection questions offered by Reverend Carol. For those online, we invite you to go into the breakout room for a virtual coffee chat. For those in person, please feel free to stay for coffee and fellowship in the Commons. There are many things happening at Olympia UU. Check out the Tuesday electronic update or the website for the most up-to-date information. Now, let us open our hearts and minds as we prepare for worship. It is good to be together. This morning, we join Unitarian Universalist congregations around the world in lighting a chalice, the symbol of our faith tradition. If you are online and have a chalice or candle, please join me as we light our chalices together with the words of Jean Rowe. We have a calling in this world. We are called to honor diversity, to respect differences with dignity, and to challenge those who would forbid it. We are people of a wide path. Let us always be open to new truths, always open to a more expansive love.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Carol McKinley, and I use she, her pronouns. Our opening words this morning are offered by Jessica Rodella. She writes in Meditation on the Astral and the Ancestral, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, we here are descended from stardust, gathered of galaxies created of carbon. From the first tremblings of a vibrant planet, we evolved. We carry the memory of the cosmos, the evolution of our cousins, the encoding of our kin, the adaptation of our cultures. From planet to people, our lives matter only as much as we mean to make it so, and is infinitely, possibly, probably so, from the plan and the planes of the astral and the ancestral, we are transformed, and we are transforming still. Come, let us worship together.
And let's sing together again. Out of the Teal hymn book again, hymn number 1003. Where do we come from? Of course, all of the hymns have a story behind them, how they came to be, how the lyrics came to be, how the music. I'm just waiting for that picture to be presented up on the screen, if you can. There you go. This particular hymn was inspired by a painting. You might recognize it as a Gauguin painting. And the French title of this painting translates to, where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? And this inspired Brian Tate to write this nice chant. Brian explains that over to the right, you see people with the young baby. Where do we come from? And then in the middle, you see people experiencing life. What are we? And over at the right, people facing death. Where are we going? Isn't that a great story? A hymn that came out of a painting. So let's try singing this chant together. Gauguin painted this, by the way, while he was in Tahiti for a year. And yeah. Where do we come from? Has 4 different parts, and we'll sing all of them, then maybe we'll try and put them together, huh? 2, ready, and where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? So do we dare to split up into 2 groups? Huh? The problem is if I use my big mouth to sing into the microphone, it's hard to go against me, huh? So I'll pull the microphone away from my big mouth, okay? And we'll let this group start. You'll do the first line twice, and then as they move to the next line, then we'll come in over here, okay? Here we go, be brave. You can't do anything wrong. If you sang the same line the whole time, you'd still be right. So there's no mistakes. Here we go, ready? Where do we come from? Where are we? What are... Sorry, I sang the words wrong. One more time. Ready? And where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Who are we? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Mystery, mystery. Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery. Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Nothing that a conductor likes better than people just desperately looking at them for help. Please help. Good job, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Lewis. I use she, her pronouns, and I will be telling you the story today of Francis David, guilty of innovation. This story was written by Gail Forsyth Vale, Gail Tittle, and Matt Tittle. For a short time, religious toleration was the rule of the land in 16th century Transylvania. The newly crowned King John Sigismund found himself ruling a country divided religiously among Roman Catholics, Calvinists, and Lutherans. Among his advisors was court preacher David Ferenc, known in the West as Francis David. There was a lot of debate about Christian doctrine in the 16th century in Europe. And King John Sigismund could have, as many kings did, simply picked the religion he liked the best or thought would give him the most power and said that was the religion of the land. But he did something different. He convened a debate and invited representatives of all of the religious traditions to a formal debate in 1568. This debate lasted a long time, 10 days, in fact, beginning at 5 a.m. every day. Now, Francis David represented the Unitarian position and relied on scripture to buttress his arguments. At the conclusion of the debate, many thought that David's arguments were the strongest. And in fact, King John Sigismund decided to become a Unitarian himself. However, he did not declare that everyone else had to be a Unitarian as well. Instead, he issued an edict of toleration that all could choose to follow the religious tradition that their conscience called them to. In 1571, Unitarianism was given legal recognition in what would turn out to be King John Sigismund's last act, because he died 2 months later in an accident, leaving no clear heir to the throne. At this point, Francis David had become the bishop of the Unitarians. Now, the new king was Stephen Bathory, and he was a Catholic. He immediately dismissed most of the Unitarians at court. He did reaffirm the policy of toleration for those Christian religions that had been named in the 1571 decree, but he said there could be no further innovation. Whatever they had said they believed in 1571 was sealed. That's it, no more. Now, Unitarianism gained many converts during that period, and despite the prohibition against any changes in doctrinal thought, new thoughts continued. Francis David, who said revelation is not sealed, continued to develop new doctrine and to explore and reform the doctrine around things like the Lord's Supper, infant baptism, predestination, and the worship of Jesus, amongst other areas of doctrine. Some were more worried about staying out of trouble, but Francis David continued to explore these new ideas and to preach the heretical ideas from the pulpit. Francis David was subsequently arrested for the crime of innovation, or the questioning and challenging of religious doctrine. The prosecutor at the trial was an old friend of his and fellow Unitarian, Giorgio Biandrata. Francis David was found guilty of innovation and condemned to prison for the remainder of his life. And he died in a royal dungeon in the castle of Deva on November 15th, 1579. Francis David died, but this idea that revelation is not sealed, that did not die. Unitarian Universalists still believe that truth is ever unfolding. We're part of a living tradition. Revelation is not sealed.
Each Sunday, we express our gratitude by joining together in service to our community and to something greater than ourselves. The offering collected here does two things. It supports the ongoing work of Olympia UU, which is also supported by your regular pledges. This offering also supports an organization that serves our community in harmony with our Unitarian Universalist values. Our Share the Plate organization for July is Hackey Farmers Collective. This is what they share about their work. Hackey Farmers Collective seeks to bolster and reincorporate traditional and inherently sustainable farming knowledge that is present in our migrant and indigenous communities. By holding close decolorization frameworks, Hackey seeks to encourage our intersecting Black, Indigenous, and immigrant peoples to reclaim the life-giving knowledge of truly sustainable foodways and plant medicine creation. You can participate in the offering by making a donation online through the church website or by texting the number that will appear on your screen. You can also mail a check to Olympia UU or place your offering in one of the baskets being passed by the ushers. May the offering now be generously given as it is gratefully received.
Thank you, everyone, for your generous gifts. We came together this morning bringing all that is in our lives. Let us open our hearts to the complexity of life as we place stones in the water of community. You will hear a drum beat as we share today. It brings into our awareness that our individual hearts beat, and together we create the heartbeat of community. Right now, I invite you to take a breath as we open our hearts to receive the complexity of all that is in our lives and our communities today. For those online, I invite you to share from your heart by entering in the chat, and those here in the sanctuary can see your sharing on the screen. For those in person today, I invite you to come forward if there is something you would like to bring into this community. You may place a stone in the water as you hold your sharing in your heart. Please come up through the side aisle and return by the center aisle. And now let us hear the heartbeat of our community and reach out our hearts in love and care to all those who share. Now we place a stone in the water for all that has been shared online and shared from the heart. We will place one final stone in the water for all that we hold in our hearts and that remain unspoken. Now please be in whatever way is comfortable for you for this time of prayer and meditation.
We're going to sing together this chant, hymn number 1049. And it's in Latin. Vieni Spirito Creatore. Come, Creator Spirit. Goes like this, if you want to join in when you feel like you've got it. Vieni Spirito Creatore, vieni, vieni, vieni Spirito Creatore, vieni, vieni. One more time. Vieni Spirito
of revelation, flame of compassion, illumine our hearts and kindle our spirits. Cloven tongues of wisdom rain down on us and unleash our tongues with the spirit of truth.
Vieni Spirito Creatore, vieni, vieni, vieni Spirito Creatore, vieni, vieni.
Light from uncreated light, fill our sight with amazing revelations and new visions. Fire of the Spirit, sear our conscience with a zeal for justice.
Vieni Spirito Creatore, vieni, vieni, vieni Spirito Creatore, vieni, vieni.
Flame of aspiration, move our feet to tread the paths of reconciliation. Come, Creator Spirit, comfort us with the warmth of your eternal love.
Vieni Spirito Creatore, vieni, vieni, vieni Spirito Creatore, vieni, vieni.
Creator Spirit, unite us with a zeal for communion with all of creation. Bless us, convert us. May we become the fire.
Vieni Spirito Creatore, vieni, vieni Spirito Creatore, vieni Spirito Creatore, vieni Spirito
Today's first reading is from the UUA Article 2 Study Commission Report. The Unitarian Universalist Association bylaws require the regular review of Article 2, which contains the principles and purposes. The Article 2 Study Commission began its review in 2021 with this charge from the UUA board, which reads, in part, proposed changes to Article 2 should articulate core UU values. One core theological value shared widely among UUs is love. The new principles and purposes should guide us in the transformation of ourselves, our communities, and our faith into active networks of collective care, restoration, and justice. They should ask us to choose love in action as the path forward. Our commitment to anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multiculturalism is love in action and should be centered in any revision of Article 2. The principles and purposes should lead us into the second quarter of the 21st century while honoring the historic roots of our liberal progressive faith.
The biochemist and science fiction author Isaac Asimov writes, "It is change, continuing change, inevitable change, that is the dominant factor in society today. No sensible decision can be made any longer without taking into account not only the world as it is, but the world as it will be." Let's just take a moment for silent reflection. We humans are myth-making creatures. We create stories that help us find meaning and explain the mystery of life. Mysteries like stories of gods and goddesses, heroes and demons, saviors and destroyers explain how this planet came to be, how life emerged, the struggles to sustain life and to make life meaningful. And each culture uses those stories to explain their world. From generation to generation, the myths are transmitted, sometimes within families, oftentimes through skilled storytellers like Homer, whose ancient retelling of ancient stories about the machinations of gods and goddesses governing the lives of Odysseus, Achilles, King Priam, and Queen Hecuba held listeners spellbound. Storytellers like Virgil, whose Aeneid recounts the founding of Rome by the sons of Aeneas, a Trojan survivor of that war. Or storytellers like those who wrote the Hebrew Bible, telling their story of creation and the relationships of the people to their God, to their world, their relationships to each other. And of course, each community's story is its own. It is not the whole story, but one part of the story of this world. And these myths and stories are kept alive through the written word and repetition in communities, making meaning, solidifying relationships, and distinguishing their communities from outsiders. Myths hold such importance in our communities that they often become belief, and questioning them becomes unthinkable. In fact, any doubt is rejected, and challenges to long-held beliefs are almost always met with denial, resistance, even persecution, as we heard in Reverend Sari's story this morning of Francis David. In 1859, Charles Darwin published his findings based on his observations during long voyages in many parts of the world in his book On the Origin of Species. Now, readers immediately reacted to his book and to his theory about how living beings changed. And not all those reactions were positive. Some said he had ignored the biblical teachings, which were considered biblical truths, had challenged long-held beliefs about the creation of the world and the place of humans in that creation. Others said Darwin's theory of evolution was based upon careful observation, that he had applied the scientific knowledge of his time to form the theory that variation occurred randomly within a species, and that those variations could be inherited by succeeding generations, passed along by those whose favorable traits allowed them to survive the struggle for existence. Now today, most of us do not question the truth of Darwin's theory. His observations, bolstered by the work of other natural scientists, have been shown to be true. And today we even know how those favorable traits are transmitted to succeeding generations. We know how genes are carried from one generation to the next. We know how those genes carried our father's receding hairline to our brother. How the shape of our jawline can be seen in old photos of our grandmother. How a certain gene inherited from our mother signals a greater possibility of developing breast cancer. We also know that from the work of geologists and paleontologists that this planet and its life forms began billions of years ago, not 10,000 years ago. And we can go to a museum and marvel at the reconstructed skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus rex And we're very grateful, as we look at that skeleton, we're grateful they roamed the earth many millions of years ago, then became extinct, and are very glad they're not prowling our neighborhoods today. Well, as believers in the science of Earth's origin, we may experience awe upon hearing the story of the Big Bang and the stunning history of this Earth and its life forms. But of course, we know that our response is not shared by all. Despite the revelations of science, we know that those, and some may even be our family members, who continue to hold firmly to beliefs in the world's creation in 7 days. 7 days that saw the emergence of fully developed life forms of plants, animal, and of course, humans. Now, to those believers, the story of the gradual evolution of life forms is profoundly disturbing. As we know, resistance to science, resistance to all new understandings of who and what we are, remains instant and also remains insistent. We continue to see this resistance in those who deny how a persistent virus that has run rampant in the world in the past 3 years is spread from one person to the next. Now, no doubt the ancestors of those doubters denied any possible truth in Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Instead of being seen as an exciting new area of science to explore, Darwin's work was seen as an attack on one's religious beliefs, an attack on those original myths, on what was seen as core, immutable understanding of creation. And we saw, or can see, the intensity of that resistance in the 1960 movie Inherit the Wind, a dramatization of the Scopes trial, the so-called monkey trial, in which a Tennessee high school teacher was arrested and prosecuted for teaching Darwin's theory of evolution. And in case you've forgotten how that movie ends, the teacher was found guilty, although in real life, Scopes' conviction was overturned, but on a technicality. However, that trial's impact was profound. In some states, the teaching of evolution in schools was prohibited, and in some, creationism, in other words, the Genesis story of the 7-day creation by an all-powerful God, had to be taught as an acceptable alternative to evolution. And even today, challenges to the teaching of evolution, like challenges to books in school libraries, persist in some communities. Yes, change is always difficult and is almost always resisted. And this is especially true when that change impacts deeply held beliefs, traditions, symbols. Darwin and the other scientists met that resistance when their work in the natural sciences, work based on observation, experimentation, and collaboration, was seen as a challenge to religious belief that long had shaped people's understanding of how their world came about and about God and the place of God in their lives. But ongoing advances in science and cultural history have not ended resistance. By closing ourselves to the challenges and the possibilities that change offers, we can find ourselves increasingly unable to adapt to an ever-changing world. In the mid-1980s, I was working as executive editor at a magazine, writing and editing submitted manuscripts. Now, for years, I had long used typewriters, beginning with my beloved Smith Corona Portable. And my model at the time that I was working, though, was an IBM Selectric. Remember those? Well, the publisher was moving toward adopting early computers and urged me to switch. Now, I didn't want to give up the Selectric. After all, it meant I had to learn how to use something new. I have to admit that my publisher got tired of my resistance and basically said, use the computer. So I did. but I did it reluctantly. But I have still held on to my Smith Corona Portable. Our faith, Unitarian Universalism, may well be beyond the IBM Selectric stage, but it, like the rest of the world, is changing. Yes, as we heard in the story, revelation is not sealed. I've always liked that slogan that our sister denomination, the UCC, the United Church of Christ, has used. God is still speaking. That revelation is not sealed. The ideas and practices that made our churches what they were in 1800 or 1865 or 1950 have, like life itself, evolved and are in fact continuing to evolve. As Unitarian and Universalist traditions established roots in these United States, they were Christian traditions. But in the early 1800s, Unitarians became divided into conservative and liberal branches. Then in 1819, William Ellery Channing, one of our early American Unitarian forefathers, spoke on the topic Unitarian Christianity, defending the liberals' branch approach to religion, emphasizing the oneness and the goodness of God, the use of reason in understanding the Bible, the centrality of Jesus' moral message, and the toleration of religious beliefs. Now, that's hardly groundbreaking from our perspective today. Nevertheless, Channing's understanding was not, shall we say, well received by the more traditional Christians. Now, although Channing didn't intend to start a new denomination, he essentially just did that as the conservative and liberal branches went their separate ways, and the American Unitarian Association was founded in 1825. Then during the next 2 decades, New England Unitarians drew upon new learnings, moving their religion toward new ways of understanding and living in their world. Just a few years after Channing's statement, Ralph Waldo Emerson, with the group called the Transcendentalists, taught that every person could experience God. Divinity didn't have to be interpreted through the words and sermons of preachers. Each person, using the gift of intuition, can perceive the sacred, the holy, and thrive among the various realities of existence. Individual spirituality can coexist with and even thrive among those separate realities. Nature, said Emerson and his circle, nature was the primary way anyone could see the work of God and experience the wonder of the world. As part of that transcendentalist circle, my favorite, Margaret Fuller, summed up that experience. She famously said, "Nowhere I worship less than in the places set apart for that purpose. The blue sky above the opposite roof preaches better than any priest because at present it represents a freer, simpler medium of religion." Fuller, as an aside, also wrote what I believe could be a slogan for contemporary ecologists. She wrote, "It is not meant that the soul should cultivate the earth, but that the earth should educate and maintain the soul." Well, the evolution of Unitarianism inched forward in 1866 when James Freeman Clarke emphasized that Unitarianism meant deeds, not creeds. Clarke emphasized that Unitarianism meant deeds, not creeds. In his book, Orthodoxy, Its Truth and Errors, Freeman wrote, "We think it is possible to have a church and even a denomination organized not on a creed," in other words, a statement of belief, not on a creed, but on a purpose of working together Suppose that the condition of membership, said Clark, was the desire and the intention of getting good and doing good. The members of a church are not those who unite in order to partake the Lord's Supper, but to do the Lord's work. The Lord's Supper, he said, is their refreshment after working. They come together to remember his love and to get strength from him. Let them sit together, express their desires, confess their faults, say what they have been trying to do, where they have failed, where succeeded, and so encourage each other to run with diligence the race set before them. A church of getting good and doing good. Well, Clark's teachings marked an expanded understanding of Unitarians' evolution from belief to action, a faith of deeds, not creeds. Channing, Emerson, Fuller, and Clark, in a period of only 40 years, had become the heralds of this evolving faith. And it kept evolving. In the 1930s, almost 100 years ago now, a group that included 15 Unitarian ministers and one Universalist minister signed the Humanist Manifesto, a document emphasizing logic and reason. That document offered a worldview that it does not require God or miraculous events. Those 15 affirmations in the manifesto not only influenced Unitarianism and Universalism, but was influenced by the evolving nature of those two traditions. And then just less than 10 years after the Humanist Manifesto in the 1940s, James Luther Adams, considered by many to be Unitarianism's greatest 20th century theologian, offered a sermon called Why We Are Liberal. And in that sermon, he said, revelation is not sealed, but is continuous. Adams concluded, as nothing is complete, nothing is exempt from criticism or from change. The Universalists, meantime, were also broadening their understanding of faith, opening their tradition to new concepts beyond their core teaching of universal salvation. And they became a more inclusive religion. And like the Unitarians, the Universalists recognized that their tradition had emerged at a certain time when they did not know what they now had come to learn, and that their faith would continue to evolve and change. So perhaps it was inevitable that in 1961, the two traditions merged. And of course, that merger, like evolution, was slow to happen. After all, conversations about the merger had begun in the 1830s. So the newly formed Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations adopted those principles, which provided the framework for the new Unitarian Universalism. And of course, those 1961 principles evolved. The ones you find in the front of that gray hymnal are not the ones that are currently being used. The ones you see there were adopted in 1985. And the sources from which the tradition draws inspiration has also developed new sources, including earth-centered religions, which it didn't have before. These have been added. Unitarian Universalism has become a tradition not of specific beliefs, but a tradition emphasizing what we are called to do. It speaks to the value and the worth of people everywhere and how we treat each other. Unitarian Universalism is indeed a living tradition. While we honor the ancient teachings that gave rise to this religion, this faith continues to evolve to reflect what we know now, and it continues to evolve. in the reading that Janet gave. She talked about the order from the UUA board following the requirement in the bylaws to review Article 2, which contains the principles and purposes. And you may be somewhat familiar with some of those changes. Perhaps some of you here participated in online discussions or in discussions we had about changes here at OUUC. A final draft of Article 2 was presented last month at the General Assembly, and a majority of delegates there voted to continue discussion on those many changes for the next 12 months. And a final vote to adopt a revised Article 2 will be taken. Now, what does that proposed revision say? It reads, as Unitarian Universalists, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritage of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Love is at the center of these 6 inseparable shared values: interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and justice. All these live through the spiritual discipline of love. Transformation, change. Transformation is a value that speaks to the need to adapt to a changing world, to an evolving world. And in this way, we covenant, we promise to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental. It is fundamental, basic to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages. Change, we are never complete and we are never perfect. Now, why is there so much discussion around these changes? Well, Article 2, as I said, contains the principles and purposes. And the current principles and purposes also, as I said, were adopted in 1985. They have become almost like a creed to some people. Yes, the changes replace the current principles and purposes, and hence those extensive discussions. After all, change is never easy. The 7 principles adopted have become belief, and dare I say, creed, to many Unitarian Universalists. And they express the profound values of this religious tradition. But the revision replaces the longer principles with 6 words, which I think are much easier to remember. Always need that. And each of these words expresses the interconnected values that grow from the love that has long and continues to be at the heart of this religious tradition. The wording changes, but the values remain. As you use, we have come a long way, baby. And each step in the evolution of this tradition served the congregations of that time. But now we prepare to move into an ever-changing world, honoring the inspiring history that has shaped this faith while holding ourselves open to living into the history that is to come. So may it be.
Let's sing together our closing song out of the Teal Hymn Book, hymn number 1017, Building a New Way. I invite you to rise in body and our spirit, and let's sing together. We are building a new way. We are building seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, the world would die. Peace and freedom is our cry. Thank you for singing.
And now we extinguish our chalice, repeating those words by Jean Rowe, which were used for our chalice lighting. We have a calling in this world. We are called to honor diversity, to respect differences with dignity, and to challenge those who would forbid it. We are people of a wide path. Let us always be open to new truths, always open to a more expansive love. And now, amen, and may you go in peace, go in joy, and go in love.
Let's sing together our unison benediction.